So what other kind of spirits slash monsters are we going to deal with? Hey everyone, welcome to Princess Gay. I'm your host Connie, and today we are here with my blind reaction to episode 6 of The Summer Hikaru Died. And last time we had this wig ghost, this wig monster spirit thing. And I'm wondering, it looked like it was scared off at the end by Hikaru, but I'm wondering if we're going to have other kind of monster of the week things like that, because that was definitely more of a monster of the week kind of episode. It felt like, and it did continue with the lore and with the main story and everything, but it felt like almost a little disconnected because of that monster of the week aspect. And that's not to say it was bad by any means. I obviously very much enjoyed the last episode, but it was very different as a vibe. Though it did continue with a lot of the gay allegories and everything. But before we begin this, there is one thing I want to address. In the comments on the last video, I was told, because I had been talking about how more overtly queer it had become since the first episode, and how the first episode was more subtle with its approach. I was told in the comments that if it had been more overt in the first episode as well, or in the case of the manga, the first 2 chapters, that it likely would have failed. Because, I guess boys love series don't do super well or whatnot. I could, I don't know. I'm not going to bring up the full comment because I don't know if I'd be able to. Well, maybe. Hold on. I don't know how quickly it'll take me to get to it. That's the thing. But it's the idea is weird to me. Because it's okay, so you're saying that this wouldn't have done as well because it's, if it were more overtly queer and it from the beginning, and that they had to kind of be more subtle to draw in more viewers at the start before they made it more queer. And it's just I'm just trying to rationalize this in my head. It's is this from a Japanese, is this from the perspective of the Japanese audience? Because I know here in America, boys love is extremely popular. Boys love manga and anime is extremely popular. And a lot of those series tend to do really well just because of being boys love. They have a massive female audience and are just, again, super popular, super well received. And there's a lot of series that are very overtly gay in terms of that, Given, that have done very well, or Yuri on Ice, that did very well. So it's weird to me that that the idea is that it wouldn't do well if it was more overt. It just, again, maybe the Japanese audience isn't as big into it. Maybe that's not as much a thing over there. But over here, it's that would do exceptionally right from the start. That would just be extremely well received. And again, the thing is, though, that there are plenty of shows and manga and all that are overtly gay that do very well. But here's the comment. I'm not going to out the person who commented, but they said if episode 1 did full-on metaphorical queer stuff and sex scenes, I mean, not literal sex scenes, but we know what this show does for that, then the general population would have dropped it instantly, without a try. Homophobes, queerphobes exist, and boys love media is specifically looked down on since it's mostly for girls. Any media for girls, boys love shoujo, josei is always looked down on. That's why episode 1 slash chapters 1 and 2 exist, so that it can penetrate the mass audience better. Now, I don't argue that that this obviously will do better with a full general audience in the way that it's handled. But boys love is definitely like more than just for girls. And more female marketed genres of like manga and anime, like it mentions boys love shoujo, josei, are very much also watched by a lot of men and NBs as well. To say that it's like only girls who watch that stuff, just I don't really think it's true at all, especially based off of what I've seen. I would honestly say that I've seen just as many guys into boys love and josei and shoujo as I have girls. And just like I've seen just as many girls who are into shonen and stuff like that. The anime community has become a lot more like diverse for one, but also has become a lot more integrated. These kinds of demographic based genres don't really like make sense in the modern day. Again, at least here in America. I can't speak for how it is in Japan because I don't live in Japan and I don't see this stuff. But I'm sure that there's a lot of crossover in Japan as well. I'm sure, even if it's not as much as there is here, I'm sure that it still exists. But the point is, like, I don't think any of the like sex metaphor stuff would have been done in episode 1. Like, that just wouldn't make sense at that point. But if they made it a lot more like overtly queer, I think it still would have worked just as well, because it's still telling the metaphor through the scope of body horror, through the scope of, you know, this supernatural creepy body horror. And that's what's getting people invested. Because even the thing is, even if they're like watching after the first episode because it's not as overt, there's a lot of, if someone's truly, you know, a homophobe, queerphobe, and is going to be put off by that, they're still going to drop it once it does become overt. That's not going to stop them from dropping it. It's just going to mean they're going to drop it at a later episode. And so it's like the people who are going to be invested in this for the horror stuff are going to be, even if it's gay. Again, think about how amazingly Yuri on Ice did. Given did really well as well. And both of those are boys' love shows. So it's like, you can't just... And honestly, both of those are directly boys' love shows. Those are not even metaphorical. Those are very, like, explicitly boys' love shows. So it's like, this definitely wouldn't... I disagree with you on this. This wouldn't have failed instantly if it had been more overt in the first episode / the first 2 chapters. I think that with its horror theming and general, like, supernatural body horror visuals and style and everything, I still think if they had kept it more overt, more clear in the first 2 chapters, the first episode, it would have done probably just as well. Because again, if any like real homophobes here will still have already dropped it by this point. They're not going to be watching this series anymore by this time. As someone who's had to deal with a lot of queer phobes, a lot of homophobes, yeah, they would not be watching anymore at this point. It just would not happen. Unless they somehow did not realize. And by this point, if they did not realize, they're just dumb. um, but yeah, it's like there are some people out there are some guys who like not even just for the homophobia, but they do look down on media that is typically targeted for girls, those kind of like misogynistic alpha male types. But they're going to be like a smaller portion of the audience than you think anyway. Most of them probably wouldn't have even begun watching this. But even I feel like a lot of people who did, unless they're also, again, homophobic specifically and all, I don't think that they're going to have a reason to drop this and all. It's like they're going to be watching for the horror aspects, for the, you know, creepiness and everything. That's what they're here for. They're not going to see this as a girl genre just because it's boys love. Even if it's technically not officially boys love, but it's boys love. They're not going to just drop it because of that at that point. And again, unless they're also homophobic. Because they're not going to see it as a girls thing. They're not going to see it like that because this is not presented in anything like that way. So it's just like, I don't know. I don't feel like I personally agree with you, but I mean, it's fine. It's different views on it and everything. And that's what gets these conversations to be interesting. That's what allows us to be able to have discussions like this. But I've been talking a lot longer than I anticipated and planned for. I kind of went on a little ramble there for a bit. Sorry about that. Let us get into today's episode and see what happens. Hold up just a sec. Before you click that link down in the description below to get to today's video, I want to remind you of all the awesome content we have both on this channel and the Princess of Gaming channel. Let's check it out. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So this episode didn't really touch too much on the gay allegory. This one was more focused on the horror aspect and more of the philosophical aspect of what it means to be alive, what it means to be dead, and what this means for Hikaru. Like, who is he is kind of the question of this, both from Yoshiki and his own perspective, and Asiko's as well. So Yoshiki asks this question early in the episode, wondering, thinking about it through the scope of this philosophy assignment he's given, this handout. It's like, oh, you have this story of this swamp man, this dude who drowns in the swamp, and suddenly a new form of him, a clone almost, comes out from the swamp, but the original is still drowning. Is this new one the same person, or is it a different person? And how do you determine that? How do you rationalize that? It's a very deep question that I am just not the right kind of person to talk about. There's other people in this world who are better with that kind of stuff, who are smarter, more well thought out. I'm not. I can be smart at certain things, but in terms of philosophical questions like this, it's like I don't know. I have no fucking clue. I can tell you my thoughts on this entire thing, and I can tell you it through a similar story I've heard, um, as an example. But I don't like have like any kind of like deep philosophical reasoning for believing this. It's just kind of like an instinctual thing, kind of like the one friend there. So there's this kind of like other story slash hypothetical I've heard a few times where it's like, so let's say um, instantaneous transportation has been invented. It's the distant future, and they've invented a way to teleport a person from like anywhere in the world to anywhere else in the world instantaneously via this device, this transporter. But you find out that it doesn't actually transport your body, it actually molecularly destroys your body and then clones it, reforming a entirely new body on the other side with all the same memories, all the same like knowledge and everything, but it is a completely different body. Would that then be the same person or not? Would that second person be the same person? Has all the memories, all the experiences, all the knowledge, um, completely sees themselves as the same person, but it's a completely separate body, completely separate physical body. Would it be the same person or not? And my answer is no. My answer is that it would be a clone of the same person. It would, again, there would be all the memories, experiences, all the knowledge, all of that would exist, but it would technically not be the same person. That person will have experienced death. Their soul is gone. Their consciousness is gone. They are dead. This is just a pure copy. It's like if you put like a piece of paper into a copy machine and then you completely burnt and destroyed the first paper. The copy isn't the same thing. It's just a copy. It may have the same information on the sheet of paper. It may have the same pictures or the same like words, but it's not the same piece of paper. It's not the same, I don't know, form or flyer or whatever. So it's like, I feel like it would be the same thing in terms of this entire teleportation thought experiment. And obviously, we know it's different here with Hikaru specifically. But that's kind of the type of thought experiment Yoshiki is thinking about here. Is Hikaru still Hikaru? Because he has all his memories, he has those experiences and that knowledge, but he openly admits and acknowledges he's not the same person. He openly admits and acknowledges that he's, this entity that has possessed Hikaru's body. So Yoshiki's thinking about it kind of from the perspective of like, does it still count as Hikaru or not? Because what actually makes a person? What determines who they are? The second person to ask who Hikaru is obviously Asuko. Asuko is asking it, though, from the perspective of her heightened sense for the spiritual. She's able to tell that something is off about Hikaru, that the way he talks, the way he just feels is off. And so her asking him, "Who are you?" is more about like a literal sense. And she's wondering if Hikaru is possessed, is being like controlled, or if it's still Hikaru in there. She's asking this from a more literal sense, while Yoshiki was asking this kind of question from a more philosophical sense. And then the third person to ask this is Hikaru himself at the very end. After Yoshiki gets angry at him and kind of storms off and just leaves during the night, Hikaru understands that he did something wrong, but doesn't understand why it's wrong. He doesn't understand what is wrong about it because he has an entirely different perspective, seeing life and death as like two sides of the same coin, and thinking that, like, because it works this way for him, that life and death are the same basic thing, just different states for humanity, and that the soul would remain and everything. And we did see in the episode with Asuko's grandmother, she's like talking about the souls do return eventually, but it's like it's not quite the same in terms of that like idea and concept to what Hikaru is thinking here. But yeah, Hikaru, when he's at the end asking like who he is, he's asking more from an emotional sense. Are all of these memories that I have, are all of these experiences, is my desire to protect and love Yoshiki my own desire, or is it what I'm expected to do because of Hikaru's memories, because of Hikaru's experiences? And so it's asking the question from a more emotional standpoint. It's like, who am I because of what I've done has made me second guess what life truly means. And so it's really interesting to see those three different perspectives kind of asking the same question towards Hikaru in this episode. It's a really smart and clever way to tackle this kind of issue. But we also tackle the fact that Hikaru is very defensive. And when he feels that something is a threat to him being able to continue to live this way, he changes from defensive to offensive. He saw the old lady, Mrs. Matsura, I think it said, as a threat. So he killed her. And again, he saw nothing wrong with this because to him, it's not that big of a deal. Life and death are, again, just two different states of the same thing. But here, he tries to kill Asuko because she questions who he is, and he sees that again as a threat to him being able to continue this life with Yoshiki. He tries to kill her, but Yoshiki luckily intercepts in time and is able to stop it from happening. And she passes out. I don't know if it's from fear or just from like shock or whatever else, but she passes out and luckily doesn't hear them talking about the truth of the matter. And she doesn't realize when she comes back to that he did try to kill her there. She doesn't really realize what happened. But this is like showcasing how afraid he is of losing what he has here with Yoshiki and everything. He is invested in it because he truly loves him. And he truly wants this relationship to remain, and he wants them to stay together. So again, any threat to that he views as something to be eliminated. But he sees pretty quickly from Hikaru's response to this how upset by this Hikaru is. And he doesn't understand. He makes it very clear. He does not understand. And he tries to explain that. But you can clearly see how upset Yoshiki is, and for good reason. And so, like, he leaves him. I mean, mind you, we see at the very end, during the post-credits, he comes back the next morning and is like, okay, let's go to school. But this is something they need to talk about. And this, I think, is one of Yoshiki's biggest issues, is that he's very non-confrontational, a lot more so than he needs to be in this situation. Like, his actions towards Hikaru here, after Hikaru almost killed Asuka, was the most confrontational he's been. But it still isn't enough, because what he needed to do is actually talk to him there. Explain to him why this was wrong. Explain to him why his outlook on this is wrong. And, like, actually help him understand that he can't be killing people. That's bad. And so that's a conversation that does need to happen. But the problem is, I feel like Yoshiki coming in at the end the next morning and like just acting as if everything's the same as it had been before, I find that to be a bit toxic, because it's basically just pushing away the issue. It's ignoring the problem. And that's not healthy. It doesn't fix anything. So that's definitely something they need to work on and talk about. But I like that this friend group is becoming more of characters to this, and that Asuka especially, because since she was shown to have this sixth sense, I wanted her to be like more of a character. I wanted to see more of how she interacts with them, and I'm glad that like the next time we really focus on her, we actually get her specifically recognizing that something is up with Hikaru, though she believes he's just possessed. And Yoshiki comforts her by agreeing with her. It's like she's clearly like not against him or anything, because she sees what she thinks is a ghost possessing Hikaru as protecting Yoshiki and everything, and, you know, being healthy for them. It's like, you could definitely, even though there's not a lot, like, in terms of the queer metaphors in this episode, you could definitely see this as, like, her almost recognizing that they're gay and that they have feelings for each other. And her, like, acknowledging that this is the best for both of them to be together like this. That they're, you know, helping each other in this situation. You could make that, like, metaphorical comparison with this. But it's also just a matter of, like, you know, they're building upon each other and keeping each other safe in this situation. So you can see it from the more literal perspective it's kind of showcasing in this episode, or the more allegorical that this series has been pushing in general. And I think either view is perfectly fine here, because that's how the series is. But yeah, I really do feel like they really need to, like, openly discuss this. And it needs to happen soon. Like, honestly, I really feel like Yoshiki needs to set some ground rules, some boundaries, some, like, some just overall important bylaws for this relationship to continue. And I hate to say it, but he should tell Hikaru that. Like, he should specifically say to him, if you want us to remain friends, if you want this relationship to continue, you need to listen to me here. You need to do this stuff, or not do this stuff in this case. You need to follow these guidelines. Otherwise, I can't be friends with you. And it sucks to say something like that. And I know Yoshiki wouldn't want to say something like that. But for the safety of himself and others, he would need to. And he could reassure, like, he doesn't have to be mean about it, but he could reassure Hikaru by saying, it's like, if you follow this, I'll be your friend. I'll continue to be by your side. I'll support you, and like, we're having fun together and everything. We can continue to hang out and do that stuff. He's like, he doesn't have to be mean about it, but he definitely needs to say something like that. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but they have to set some boundaries here, because Hikaru is clearly not understanding. And they have to have a discussion. They have to specifically discuss what life and death means to humans, and how that's different than what it means to him. And it almost kind of reminds me of the Owl House in a way, which is a huge positive, of course. It reminds me a little bit of the Collector. Because the Collector didn't understand what death meant to people either. Because from his perspective, he could just fix anything that broke. If it broke, quote unquote, he just snaps his fingers and it's back together. He never learned what death means, and he never understood that that can't just be fixed with the snap of fingers. And so that's a lesson he had to learn, unfortunately, the hard way. And they did learn it, and they did understand it in the end. But it kind of fucked them up for a second there after Luz did what she did. Not as much as it fucked up King and Ida, of course, but, there's reason for that. But yeah, it's like, they just genuinely didn't understand. And it's the same thing here with Hikaru. Hikaru just doesn't understand. And it's not through willful ignorance or anything like that. It's just he has no reason to know that kind of thing yet. He has not had to deal with that yet. But now he does. And so I really, really hope that within the next episode, or at least two, or at most two, rather, that they discuss this. Because this needs to happen sooner rather than later, I would say. But yeah, tell me in the comments below, what did you think of this episode of The Summer Hikaru Died? And thank you so much for tuning in. For now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.